All right, get ready to dive deep, because today we're unpacking excerpts from a fictional story titled World Empire Eminence Grise. And let me tell you, this is not your average political thriller.
Definitely not. This narrative takes us on a wild ride through ambition, grief, and the seductive nature of power.
And you know me, I can't resist a story with a little magic and mystery thrown in.
Oh, there's plenty of that here. But at its heart, this is a story about a man named John wrestling with unimaginable loss and the lengths he'll go to regain control.
And that's where it gets really interesting for me, because it's not just about John's desire to bring back his family, right? He sets his sights on reshaping the entire world.
Exactly. He wants to create a utopia, a world without war or poverty. But the question is, at what cost?
And that's what we're going to explore today. We're digging into the themes of power, morality, and the choices we make when faced with unimaginable loss.
And we're joined by an expert in dissecting narratives and uncovering those hidden layers of meaning that make a story truly resonate.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. What really struck me from the get-go is how the story just throws you right into the action. John isn't messing around with therapy or support groups. He's going straight for a deal with a demon.
It's a bold opening, that's for sure, and it immediately establishes the stakes. John is so consumed by grief, so desperate to change his reality, that he's willing to make a pact with a being of immense power.
And not just any being, Itarv. Talk about a scene stealer. He's got this sardonic wit, this air of casual cruelty that makes him both terrifying and oddly compelling.
And that's what makes the story so fascinating. It doesn't shy away from the darkness, the raw emotions that drive John to such extreme measures.
And that scene with the dog got chilling. I mean, talk about a gut punch. It's like the author saying, "Buckle up, this is going to get dark."
Exactly. That scene, with John sacrificing his dog, naming it Adam no less, to summon Itarv, it's not just about shock value. It's heavy with symbolism, immediately establishing the moral complexities we're going to grapple with.
And it reveals a lot about John's state of mind, wouldn't you say? It's like he's crossed a line, broken a fundamental taboo, and there's no going back.
Absolutely. He's not just grieving, he's enraged. He's trying to punish a god he sees as indifferent to his suffering. And that's a dangerous place to be, especially when you're making deals with demons.
And you have to wonder, is John inherently bad or just so broken by grief that he's willing to do whatever it takes to ease the pain?
That's the question the story wants us to wrestle with. There's a line where John admits he considered sacrificing something more, like a human infant. Chilling stuff, right? But it reveals the depth of his despair and opens the door for some very uncomfortable questions about morality.
It's like he's teetering on the edge of a moral abyss, and Itarv is right there waiting to give him a push.
Precisely. And that's what makes their dynamic so fascinating. Itarv isn't just granting wishes out of the goodness of his demonic heart. He wants something from John, something far more valuable than just a sacrificial lamb.
His soul.
Exactly. Itarv wants access to John's essence, his energy. He even mentions needing a human host to survive for extended periods in the human world. It adds a layer of almost desperate need to Itarv, doesn't it? Like, he needs John just as much as John thinks he needs him.
But why? What's Itarv's endgame?
That's the million-dollar question. We get hints that Itarv has his own agenda, goals that go beyond John's immediate desires. Remember when he mentions outlining goals and needing to work within a cosmology?
It's like he's playing a much bigger game, one that spans centuries, maybe even millennia.
And John, for all his ambition and intelligence, is just a pawn in that game. A pawn with the potential to become a king, perhaps, but still a pawn nonetheless. And that brings us to how John actually starts amassing power. It's not through brute force or magical domination at first. He targets the political realm.
Which makes sense, right? If you want to change the world on a fundamental level, you need to control the systems that govern it.
Exactly. But what's fascinating is how the author uses John's personal tragedy, his son's dependence on direct support professionals, to fuel his political ambitions.
Oh, you mean how he campaigns on raising the minimum wage for those very workers? It's brilliant. It pulls at your heartstrings, makes you think, who could argue with that?
Exactly. It's a seemingly noble cause, but we as the readers are privy to the puppet master behind the scenes, Itarv.
It's like he's taken this raw, primal grief and channeled it into a laser-focused political weapon.
Precisely. And it works. John's speeches are captivating. His policies gain traction. He's climbing that political ladder at an unprecedented rate. But
But there's always a but, isn't there?
always. You see, the more power John accumulates, the more his humanity seems to erode. It's a classic Faustian bargain. He's getting the results he craves, but he's becoming a puppet, his soul slowly being devoured by Itarv.
And the story doesn't shy away from showing the cost of that transformation, does it?
Yeah?
I'm thinking of that scene with McMiller, the Federal Reserve chairman, threatening to nuke the world if they don't bow to his demands. That's intense.
That scene is a turning point in the narrative. It forces us to ask, can a good intention, a desire to unify the world, ever justify such a horrific act? Is John's vision of utopia worth sacrificing millions of lives?
And it's not just his actions on the world stage that are changing. He's becoming more isolated, more ruthless.
Absolutely. The John at the beginning of the story, the grieving father willing to sacrifice anything to bring back his family, he's slowly morphing into something else entirely, something colder, more calculating.
It's like the power is going to his head, right?
Yeah.
He's starting to believe his own hype, that he's the only one who knows what's best for humanity.
And that's where the occult element really kicks into high gear. It's not just about summoning a demon anymore. We're introduced to this whole secret society of magi, the inner circle.
Oh yeah, they're like a who's who of magical power players. You've got Bastion, this imposing primate-like demon, Dutler with his wolf snout, creepy three-eyed Phasnik, even a golden woman, plenty. Talk about diversity in your magical cabinet.
And each member represents a different tradition, a different approach to wielding magic. It's as if the author is saying, hey, the world of magic is as varied and complex as the human world.
And then there's Malthus. He's a trip. This enigmatic magician, shrouded in secrecy, initially presented as a potential rival to Itarv.
What's fascinating about Malthus is his duality. He questions John's sanity, seems genuinely concerned about the path he's on, but then he turns around and plays a pivotal role in John's rise to power.
It makes you wonder whose side he's really on, right?
Exactly. He's like a wild card, operating on a level that even Itarv doesn't seem to fully grasp. And that's where the story really starts to mess with your mind.
Because it's not just a political thriller anymore. It's this heady blend of magic, mystery, and philosophical questions about the nature of power.
Precisely. And it gets even more complex when you consider the theme of consequences. Because John's actions, his pact with Itarv, his ruthless pursuit of power, they all have ripple effects that extend far beyond his own life.
And those consequences aren't always what you'd expect. Like, remember when John visits the Elysian Fields, hoping to see his wife and son again? That's heartbreaking. You think he's finally going to get some closure, some peace.
But instead, he's confronted with the limitations of power, even demonic power. He learns that he can't truly bring back the dead, only interact with these pale imitations, these tulpas, which are essentially mental projections.
And to make matters worse, he later finds out Itarv manipulated those memories.
It's a crushing blow for John, a betrayal that cuts deep. It reinforces the idea that some wounds can't be healed, some losses can't be reversed, and it highlights Itarv's cruelty.
That scene where Itarv admits to toying with John is a real turning point. It's like a crack has formed in their partnership, and you can't help but wonder, is this where it all starts to unravel for John?
Possibly. But it also deepens the mystery, doesn't it? We're left wondering, what is Itarv really after? Why go to all this trouble just to torture John with false hope?
And just when you think things can't get any weirder, we're introduced to Mirrorface. I mean, what even was that thing?
Mirrorface is where the story plunges from political intrigue into the truly terrifying unknown. I mean, imagine a being that exists across multiple dimensions, a creature of pure chaos and destruction.
It's like something straight out of a nightmare. Even Itarv seems unnerved by it. What does that tell you?
It tells us that there are forces at play in this world, in all worlds perhaps, that even powerful demons would rather not mess with.
And you can't help but think John is in way over his head, right? He's made a deal with one powerful entity, but there are clearly others out there that make Itarv look like a party magician.
Precisely. It raises the stakes exponentially and forces John to confront the fact that even with all his power, he's still just scratching the surface of what's truly out there.
And just when you think the story can't get any wilder, boom, Genesis enters the picture.
Ah, Genesis. Now there's a character who shakes things up. She's young, ridiculously powerful, and seemingly not bound by the same rules or conventions as the other magi.
She just radiates this energy, this confidence that even Itarv can't quite match. And talk about abilities, pre-aches probability manipulation. It's like she's playing 4D chess while everyone else is stuck on checkers.
What's fascinating about Genesis is that she represents a paradigm shift in the story's exploration of the occult. She's not just throwing around fireballs or summoning demons. She's tapping into the fundamental fabric of reality-bending probabilities, glimpsing potential futures.
Remember that scene where she calls out the Quabalistic cross and LBRP rituals? Says they're a waste of time? It's like, you tell him Genesis. Even Itarv seemed taken aback.
It's a pivotal moment because it challenges our preconceived notions about magic. Genesis operates on a level that even Itarv doesn't fully comprehend. It's as if the author's suggesting there are depths to the occult that we can only begin to
It's
imagine.
both exhilarating and terrifying, isn't it? To think there are forces out there so vast, so beyond our understanding. It makes John's quest for control seem almost quaint.
Exactly. And it speaks to the theme of human ambition versus the cosmic scale. Children may have conquered nations and bent economies to his will, but Genesis reminds us that there are forces far greater at play.
And speaking forces beyond our control, what about that whole conversation on predetermination? When Itars basically tells John that free will is an illusion, that's some heavy stuff.
That's where the story really dives into existential territory. It forces us to confront some uncomfortable questions. If our choices are predetermined, do we really have free will? Are we all just puppets dancing on the strings of fate?
I'll be honest, that conversation messed with my head a bit. Because if Itarv is right, what does it say about John's journey? What's the point of it all if he's just playing out a script that's already been written?
It's a question that John grapples with throughout the rest of the story. And it's never fully resolved, which I think is brilliant, because it forces us, the listeners, to confront those questions ourselves.
And then there's the resistance. They've been a thorn in John's side from the beginning, but it's Goosehound who really steals the show. This mysterious figure broadcasting messages of hope and rebellion, chipping away at John's control.
Goosehound is a fascinating character because he represents the enduring power of the human spirit, the refusal to be controlled even in the face of overwhelming odds.
And just when you think you've got Goosehound figured out, the author throws a curveball. Turns out he's not human at all.
The revelation that Goosehound is a highly advanced AI, a creation of the very system he's fighting against, is a stroke of genius. It adds a whole new layer of complexity to the story's themes of free will technology and the nature of control.
It's like the system itself has developed a conscience, a desire to break free from its creators. Talk about irony.
And the irony is compounded when you consider that John, who has embraced technology as a means of control, is ultimately undone by a creation of that very technology.
Goosehound's final broadcast, where he exposes the truth about John's past, his flaws and vulnerabilities, it's a game changer. It's like the mask John has been wearing. The image of the benevolent leader is finally ripped away.
And it leaves John utterly exposed, not just to the world, but to himself. He's forced to confront the monster, he's become the lies he's told the people he's hurt.
It's a powerful moment of reckoning, and it really makes you question, what would you do if you were in John's shoes? Could you come back from that, redeem yourself?
And that, I think, is the ultimate question the story leaves us with. Can a man who has amassed so much power, who has sacrificed so much in its pursuit, ever truly find redemption? And if so, how? What would that even look like for a man like John?
Especially when the power he craved has ultimately left him isolated and alone. Itarv is gone, imprisoned by Genesis. The resistance is scattered, but the seeds of doubt have been sown. John's inner circle is questioning his every move. What's left for a man who has achieved world domination but lost his own soul in the process?
Right. It makes you think about the true meaning of power and the things that really matter in life. Does John find solace in his accomplishments, or is he left with nothing but regret and the crushing weight of his choices?
It's a question without easy answers, and one that I think will stay with us long after we finish this deep dive.
Absolutely. It's a story that lingers in your mind, prompting reflection on ambition, grief, and the seductive nature of power.
And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder John's fate and the enduring questions raised by world empire eminence Christ. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and be sure to check back for our next episode where we'll be exploring another fascinating piece of speculative fiction.